Purdy threw lots of passes to receivers he wouldn't normally target during games and completed just 6 of 12 throws, 50%. After a few of his incompletions, Greg, he turned away from the intended target in disgust. Purdy can't get Brandon Aiyuk back fast enough. Now, we're going to talk more about Aiyuk, who was there but not catching any passes. But right now, we'll get to Brock's training camp struggles. Something or nothing.
All right, well, before I even answer, let me pull back the curtain a bit, because we are in a weird spot when it comes to Brock Purdy training camp coverage. Because the two people who cover this team most closely, Grant Cohn of Sports Illustrated and David Lombardi of The Athletic, neither of which are really neutral arbiters in my eyes. I think Grant has a pessimistic view of Purdy, which I happen to believe is the correct one, but I will admit it's not straight down the middle. Meanwhile, I told you this morning when you were asking about this potential bias, David Lombardi, I think, truly believes he might be the second coming of Tom Brady. And today I tried to look up what David had written about training camp yesterday, but instead what he had written today was a 2,000-word opus about Brock's time at Iowa State, including an amazing fake on a read option in practice from 2017.
Well, practice matters, I
so
guess.
Again, it is going to be hard to get right down the middle, but I think it is fair to say Brock has struggled a bit in this camp. And until Trent Williams and Brandon Aiyuk are back, him without Trent Williams and Brandon Aiyuk is something to watch. Because, once again, I think he is the biggest X factor in the entire NFL this year. I truly believe that. If Brock Purdy is the guy that Brew currently claims to believe he is, and then years later will deny he ever believes in him, they were just the numbers, then the Niners are set up to be Chiefs West. They have a brilliant play caller. They have excellent players on both sides of the ball. They will have a cost-controlled quarterback for the next couple of years, and then who cares that he costs a bunch? He's a great player at the most important position. If he's not that, then this year is most likely the year we find out. And the reason I have such a skeptical lens is because I do feel like I've seen this story before. And folks can say it's not the same, and it's not the exact same. But if I show you Brock's has 27 starts, Jimmy's first 27 starts, and we put them side by side, I mean, it's not apples and bowling balls, fellas. And by the way, I think Brock is better than Jimmy Garoppolo. I do. But when that is in my mind, or in my brain, and I saw it, and I felt like we were having the same arguments, it is going to be hard for me to dive in, head first the way I would if it were C.J. Stroud, or the way I would if it were any player in any other system than this player in this system. So yeah, it is something to me, Coach.
Well, when you do look at those numbers, he's got significantly less interceptions.
Yes.
He's got a significantly higher quarterback rating.
Because of the interceptions, because all the other numbers are the same.
Okay, so he's got a significantly higher quarterback rating. And then he played in the league a lot less than Jimmy Garoppolo had when Jimmy Garoppolo got his opportunity.
Yes.
So he was a lot further on. So to say that it's apples to apples, I don't think that's completely fair. This is a guy
Apples to green apples.
Okay, but this is a guy that came in and very few expectations. He has to take over a situation. He does incredibly well his first year. I'm as skeptical as you in terms of whether or not he's truly the answer, but he did answer a lot of those questions when he was able to come back in meaningful games last season, which is another step in his progression. And I think part of the reason this is a story is because he's getting more scrutiny, and with Brandon Aiyuk out, that's adding more scrutiny as well, as opposed to this. If Aiyuk was back and he was having these problems, maybe it would be a little bit more of a concern, but it still really isn't, because in the games that have counted, he's been excellent.
Well, I'm going to go and say it's something. It's something because yesterday I was on the side of a guy who hadn't thrown any interceptions, and I said that was something. And so for a guy who has been struggling in camp, it has to be something. Anytime you're starting to show frustration and it's becoming more visible, and that's not your character trait. That's not what you typically walk around doing. Like, he's a pretty stoic, even-keel guy. He never gets too high, never gets too low. So when you start to hear stories like this, you do want to read into it a little bit, not overstate it, but you want to start watching it. And one of the things that we are kind of looking and waiting for is to see how real and how stable Brock Purdy truly is, and if the bottom is about to fall out. Yeah. That's just what we're kind of waiting to see until he's going to always have to continue to prove that he's going to be that guy. Like, that's just going to be his role right now until maybe this season and then the next, we'll see. But right now, if you're missing players, when we've seen him miss players in actual games, it's like, okay, Brock, you gotta kind of put on the big backpack today.
Yeah.
He's not been able to wear that backpack.
My concern or question is, has he really been different in this camp than the camp before? Or are people just viewing him with a different lens?
Well, no, I think it's...
Are they viewing him more harshly than they have in the past? And now they're noticing things that were always there that they just didn't notice in the previous camp because they were so enamored with the story from his first season.
That can very well be the case, but once you start to perform and you start to be considered one of the best year after year, this is second year now, and he's considered to now be one of the, he was in an MVP conversation last season. So you're going to be talked about a little differently. You're going to be held to a different standard going into this camp.
And last year in camp, he was coming off the elbow, so he wasn't even like a full go the whole time. And the year before, he was third string on the depth chart. But go ahead. You said you were going to burst the bubble, so I want to hear because you also got angry at Greg during his, I thought, very eloquent and resplendent commentary.
They were splendid.
Well, a few things.
Yeah.
One, I care about the games that matter, like Coach. And the last game I watched of Brock was the Super Bowl, and he played well. So I'm not putting as much weight on these practices, throwing to guys that he wouldn't normally throw to, as I do on the Super Bowl. In fact, I weigh 10,000 times more than a practice. Two, I've got a friend named Yevon. Yevon is a bit of an exaggerator. But in a positive way. Like, everything's like, oh, this party was so amazing. Until one time I overheard him describing a party that I was at, and the party was just fine.
Yeah.
So I went through, and I realized he just exaggerates. It's okay. It's part of his charm. I went through all the commentary Grant Cohn had today.
Yeah.
It was titled, the article was The Good and the Not So Good.
Yeah, that's
And Brock was one of the not so good.
Yeah.
Here are the other guys. Danny Gray. Guess what he did? He ran a back corner fade in the end zone and barely reached his arms up when the ball arrived. He's hopeless. Okay, so that's out for Danny Gray. He's done. Ricky Pearsall. He missed a practice because he was hurt.
Oh, he's made of glass.
This guy's made of glass.
Well, it's his third injury.
What a disappointing first-round pick. Yeah. We haven't played a game yet. He missed a practice. He's made of glass. And guess who else got the final spot?
Kyle Shanahan.
Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, I read the article.
Oh, my goodness. He ran a trick play.
It was so
and
slow
it didn't work. It was slow to develop. and Grant, who I do appreciate colorful writing, scrap that play, Kyle. That's from Grant telling Kyle Shanahan what plays he should run.
But hold on.
So I'm taking Grant, and I do appreciate it. We've cornered the market on cogent analysis, right? There's not a lot of money to be made there. You got to go to the extremes. But the fact that Brock, I'm taking all of this as a bit of exaggeration.
Okay, except here's the problem, I think, with that analysis, is you only went through, because this is what the guy does for every training camp practice, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
So all it takes to get the exaggeration in your favor is to be on the good side. Have a good practice, and you get that. It's not all tearing people down.
No, it's not. There's 6 good ones.
Like a lot.
Right. No,
there were 6 good ones.
There's 6 good ones and 6 bad ones.
Yeah.
And so, and again, to be fair, let's check the roster when the roster cutdown happens. If Danny Gray makes the team,
he's hoping.
I'm guessing
he's not
no.
going to make it.
And I'm guessing no.
Ricky Pearsall made a glass.
Okay, well, here's the other thing.
Samuel L. Jackson.
Again, it can be a little early, but I guarantee you, this very moment, they're like, hey, John Lynch, it's a weird thing. We're going to allow it. Well, you can have a do-over on that first-round pick. Again, it's very early, but you can have a do-over. Do you think he'd take it? Do you think it'd be like, hey,
I already got one with Trey Lance.
the guy who went 32, Xavier Worthy, the guy you didn't pick at 31? Just flip-flop it. Would you like to do it? I bet he would.
Oh, yeah. How many catches have they had? Zero.
I'm just telling you.
Zero.
They also say that Brock Purdy was 50%. It's not like he only had one completion. He was 50% to a bunch of dudes that he doesn't normally work with.
But those are the dudes he might have to. Okay.
Yeah, but maybe they dropped.
Now he's off the team.
Did we have any drops?
Xavier Worthy.
Were there any drops in that?
I don't know. I feel like that.
I think we got to talk about
even money on either thing. I think it's more than 50% that he leaves. But I don't think, a week ago I thought it was 98%.
Yeah.
We did a whole segment as if it were done and it was just not agreed to. What, to me, the bigger story, Aiyuk, CD, Jamar, is feels to me there is starting to be a half-hearted, not full-throated yet, market correction on wide receivers, which we talked about this months ago, and then it's been alluded to other times. So just follow with me, Coach, for a moment.
I'm trying.
So when ESPN did their top 10 at every position list, where the people vote, remember when Mahomes wasn't unanimous #1 quarterback and got him on the board? Yeah. 29 wide receivers got votes in the top 10. There were 29 guys that executives thought, were top 10 guys. In this and that's with no rookies eligible for it, in a draft where 9 of the first 34 picks, 7 first-rounders and the first 2 picks of the second round were wide receivers. The reason I bring all of that up is the price of wide receivers is higher than ever, and it seems like the supply of good ones is bigger than ever. And listen, I'm no economist, but I think those two things usually is not how it goes. If the supply is bigger than ever, the price is not usually higher than ever. So I think we are approaching a world where teams are like, man, $32 million for, I don't know, the 7th to 12th best receiver in football, or the Ricky Pearsall, if he's not made of glass, who I can get 80% of the production for 5% of the cost. That sounds attractive. So I don't think teams are actually ready to take that plunge yet, but I think they are starting to stem the tide, if you will, right now, because that's the position, Coach, that's coming out of college more ready than ever before. There's more of it than ever before, and so at some point the market will correct itself.
You would love to be able to say that the guy you're drafting is going to give you 80% of Aiyuk's production, and they went first-round draft pick at wide receiver, I'm sure, to give them some security if he moved on. But remember, Aiyuk had 28 big plays last year,
he was
20-plus yards, 500 more yards than Deebo Samuel. He was so impactful, and you understand what you have. Like, he's established value. I think he wants to stay. I think they want him to stay. I would imagine a good short-term solution is or give him a raise this year so it doesn't affect the cap next year. Let him become a free agent next season, and you get all the upside of a guy who's chasing a contract with a team that's very good, and he's satisfied because he gets more money, and you're not killing your cap moving forward. And I think it's a
total sense,
very reasonable short-term solution with tons of upside for San Francisco and tons of upside for Brandon.
I'm with that. I think this is a great sign. If you're a 49ers fan, you're excited to hear this news that he's at practice, he's in 49er gear, he is there present.
Can I ask something silly, because we discussed this in the meeting? Would it make a difference if he showed up in just his regular clothes, the fact that he put on, like, 49ers gear?
It would. I think it would, because you take the time. You got to understand, when you are trying to sever ties, you want to kind of remove any type of thing
clean out your social media.
Yeah, that's priority number one.
The AD, that's all, folks.
That's priority number one. But I'm not going to, if we're at a confrontation, and we're kind of trending towards a breakup, I'm not going to wear a shirt that you bought me. I'm not going to wear something and start having a conversation when I know I'm going to see you. Oh, you got me this. I'm not going to do that if I'm leaning towards walking away. And so that's my point that I'm making. I think that he is leaning towards, you know what, this might be where I need to stay.
But I'd say the only flip side to that, Greg, is if we're in a confrontation and you're not wearing my shirt, then I'm going to fine you, and it's going to cost you a lot of money.
Oh, you have to wear the gear?
Yeah, there's certain things that you have to do, otherwise it's conduct detrimental to the team.
Well, certainly if you showed up in Steelers gear. I don't know if you've gotten fined for a white T-shirt.
What if he had that Carson Wentz outfit on? All the teams that are
problematic.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
You're a couple plays from winning the Super Bowl. And this is again where I get frustrated. Because I watched a Super Bowl between those two teams where the Niners were a couple plays away from winning it. A couple plays, Jimmy Garoppolo have a ball batted down. Jimmy Garoppolo missed a guy wide open who would beat the Chiefs for a touchdown, and he got killed for it. And shortly thereafter got run out of town. I watched this Super Bowl where the Niners offense actually didn't function at as high of a level as it did in the previous one, where Brock Purdy has a ball batted down, where he misses a guy running wide open for the Super Bowl. And all the commentary is, man, Brock did his level best in that game. And that's where I think there is a double standard. If people agree with me that this is an overachieving player who it's a hell of a testament that he's where he is, good for him, attaboy, then fine. Then yes, then that's a fine evaluation.
That Patrick Mahomes was an underachieving player in that situation?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Patrick Mahomes is Superman, and you got Brock Purdy who shows up and this little kid who suddenly might will his team to the Super Bowl. As opposed to the billion-dollar man.
So I totally agree. And but the problem with that, because Wild tried to do that same thing on the morning call today. If folks want if we want to have a discussion about the level of play from Mahomes and Purdy in that game, and then the real discussion, which it appears you're implying, which is how good is Patrick Mahomes really? Let's have the discussion. I don't think anyone actually wants to have it. I think they want to throw it out there and then run away from it. If you want to have,
Patrick Mahomes is way better than Brock Purdy.
What
are we talking about?
That's not the case.
No, okay, well then, hold on a second. The whole conversation around Brock Purdy is whether or not he's actually this guy. Whether or not he's actually an MVP caliber player. Whether or not he actually
was. Here, the actual conversation was he was.
No, but hold on.
But hold on. He was. Was he in the MVP conversation?
Yes.
Then he is an MVP caliber. Was he in the Super Bowl? Then he is a Super Bowl caliber player.
Okay.
And was he lined up with Patrick Mahomes head to head?
Yes.
Then he was lined up to Patrick Mahomes.
Got it.
Not in this fake world where he's not what he actually is.
In that Super Bowl, were there plays left on the field by Brock Purdy that cost them that Super Bowl?
Yes, just like every Super Bowl loser from Super Bowl I. No one loser has ever played a perfect game. Of course. Jalen Hurts played an amazing game. Mm-hmm. He also lost the Super Bowl for them.
Correct.
Okay.
Agreed.
It is what it is.
Agreed. Like, when I look at this, like, Brock Purdy is spot on. I think he's right. Where I would disagree with you is what we try to do is we compare these quarterbacks going head to head. And with Brock Purdy, yes, there is a lower level of expectation because of what we've seen he's going up against do. And that's Patrick Mahomes. He's been so good so frequently in the brightest moments and the brightest lights to where Brock Purdy, it's like, okay, if he can do that, then man, that's impressive. It's not, oh, Brock Purdy is going to come in here and he's going to show up Patrick Mahomes. We expected Patrick Mahomes to do that. And Brock Purdy, but the hope was that he at least keeps up.
That's the revisionist history. The Niners were the favorites. The Niners were supposed to win that game. The Niners were the team that had the ball 3 times in the second half with a chance to go up 2 scores. And on those 3 drives, let me check, got -2 yards and had 3 and outs. The Niners were the team that had, we can show you the plays, the game in their hand 3 separate times.
Look at what we're doing. You're talking about the team, and then we're separating the quarterback.
No.
So if it were just the quarterbacks, no one would say Brock Purdy is the favorite. But we're talking the roster, so yes, based on what we had seen all season long and what the 49ers had been able to do, I'm outside my mind if I don't think they're the better team.
And so the point that I am trying to make is I feel like folks are trying to, sorry for the cliche, have their cake and eat it too with Brock, which is, here are his numbers, here's his career, he is, to Wilds' point, an MVP caliber player, while simultaneously having this take. But thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get more from the show and to check out clips from other shows on FS1.